Thank you for coming to the Authors in the School program. This is put on by the Whistler Writers Festival, which just finished here in Whistler. I'm the organizer, Rebecca Wood-Barrett, and I would like to acknowledge that we are very grateful to be able to work, learn, and play here on the unceded shared territory of the Squamish and Lillooet Nations. This program is made possible by the generous support of the Whistler Blackcomb Foundation, Whistler Community Foundation, the Province of British Columbia, Libby McKeever, who some of you may know, Rotary Whistler Millennium, Whistler Public Library, and the Whistler Writing Society. So there's a lot of groups that come together to put books in the schools here in the Sea to Sky corridor and bring incredible authors to this space to be a part of it. And so I would like to introduce to you Xiran J. Zhao to talk about their debut novel, Iron Widow, which is a sci-fi reimagining of China's only female emperor. Xiran J. Zhao is a first-gen immigrant from small-town China who was raised by the internet. A recent graduate of Vancouver's Simon Fraser University, they wrote science fiction and fantasy, while they probably should have been studying more about biochemical pathways. You can find them on Twitter for memes, Instagram for cosplays and fancy outfits, and YouTube for long videos about Chinese history and culture. Iron Widow is their first novel, and I am very excited to have them here. Congratulations on your debut novel.
Thank you.
First question, what was it like finding out that you had debuted as a #1 New York Times bestseller?
Oh man, I was sitting in my house and my cat was like suckling on my pants. And I was like, oh, cool.
Incredible. How hard is it to debut on the New York Times bestselling list?
Well, I'm only the second YA writer to debut a #1 this year. So
That's incredible. That is incredible. I wonder, it must feel surreal.
it does. But at the same time, because like everything happened while I was just sitting in my house, right? So it doesn't really feel, my life doesn't really feel different, you know?
All being locked down. I'm sure everybody can feel that way.
I know, because it's weird, because you would expect like, oh, like a #1 New York Times bestseller must live such a glamorous life. But no, I went right back to like, I found out and then I went right back to sleep with my cat there. And then being a writer involves a lot more being passed out beside your cat at like 4 p.m. than you expect. And sorry to you guys, you guys can't enjoy that life just yet. You guys gotta go to school. Sorry. Well, you guys get out of school at 3 p.m., right? So you can just go to bed at the same time as me. So congratulations.
And I did go and look at Twitter last night and saw some of your notes about, what it's like being paid as an author. And it's not, even though you've, had some huge success right out of the gate, maybe you're not actually seeing the financial reward of that yet.
Yes, because like payments in the publishing industry work very weirdly. But hold on. How many of you have dreams of being an author? Don't do it. No, I'm kidding. But for sure, it's like publishing has a very weird payment schedule. And actually, I get way more money as a YouTuber. I'm actually a YouTuber. I have 340,000 subscribers, so I'm not just like uploading my like Let's Plays and 5,000 people watch it. People do watch my videos, okay?
That's cool. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that later.
Okay.
So could you give us a really big picture overview of your book, Iron Widow?
All right, so Iron Widow is a sci-fi reimagining of China's only female emperor. And how many of you watch anime? Oh my god, you weebs. Yeah, so this is a very weeby book, actually. How many of you have seen the anime Darling in the Franxx? Oh, nice. Oh, good taste. Good taste. All right. Don't Google this anime, polite company. But yes, this book is actually directly inspired by Darling in the Franxx. Like I watched Darling in the Franxx, and then it had like it had boys and girls pairing together to pilot giant mechas. And I was like, yo, that's so cool. But then that second half of the show was not it. Like, good God. Like the first 13 episodes was like the best anime I'd ever watched. And then it just like, it went totally downhill in a direction I did not want it to go. I was so disappointed. And then I was ranting to my friend, author Rebecca Schaefer. I don't know if you've heard of her book, Not Even Bones. It's a webtoon. And I was ranting, and then suddenly I was like, hey, I'm going so off the rails here that I'm basically making up an original story. And so I was like, maybe I could write this story. And so I did. So this book came out of my disappointment with an anime, and it made me a #1 New York Times bestseller. So let your disappointment take you places, kids.
So can you tell us about the world of the story? So I wasn't really that familiar with the term mechas.
Yeah.
Can you break that down? I might ask you as we go along, what does that mean? Because
Mechas? Oh, you don't know because you're not a weeb.
no.
Yeah, so.
I'm gonna become one though.
Are you?
Yes.
Are you? Are you sure?
Yes.
You can handle anime?
Yes.
Okay.
So yes, because I started Googling Pacific Rim yesterday.
Oh, that's not an anime.
And no, but I
Yeah,
didn't.
okay.
So the book is a mashup, at least on the back. It says that between Pacific Rim and Handmaid's Tale. So I have read The Handmaid's Tale.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I had a sense of, okay, but what's Pacific Rim? Because I thought war, but then,
Oh, just big robot. Mechas are just big robots, but
They're-
it's a genre that's like pioneered in Japanese anime.
Mm-hmm.
And like I really like the mecha genre, like just like Darling in the Franxx and Gundam and that kind of thing. But it's like the genre has always felt very like male focused to me, and anime doesn't do the best job with its female characters. So I was like, what if I like told a mecha story from a feminist perspective and had the protagonist be one of these girls who's like forced to be sexualized for the amusement of teenage boys.
so the story begins with Wu Zetian, and she is really on the outskirts. Can you start with her and tell us, what her world is like when the story starts?
Yeah, so she's a peasant girl. So like, have you guys seen that movie, The Great Wall by Matt Damon? It's the terrible movie. Yes. Oh, really? Good God, you guys contributed to the box office of that? I hope you didn't. But so The Great Wall is about like these aliens who are attacking the Great Wall, and that's basically like the setting in my story. So it's like this fake fantasy sci-fi China called Huaxia, and they're being besieged by these like giant mecha aliens. They're basically like Transformers, Cybertronian, but they don't transform, they're just like blobs, which is a reference to a Chinese mythical creature. And so they're attacking, and then so Huaxia has this like great wall to protect themselves, and they use giant mecha to fight the Hunduns or Hundans. Let's get down to business to defeat the Hunduns. And so that's her world. She lives on the frontier of that.
Now, the setup for the story is that so humans are having to fight these Hunduns.
Yeah.
And they and so very special pilots can become the pilot of these large mechas, which are called chrysalises in this
yeah.
story. But there's a very unusual and unique setup for the male and female pilots. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So they have to pair together to pilot the mechas. But the girls, they tend to die in battle a lot more often from the mental strain of like being in the like psychic battle link. So they're seen as disposable concubines, while the boy pilots become celebrities and they're worshipped. And they get to have a whole harem full of these like beautiful concubine pilots.
And so for Zetian, who's the main character, she comes at this from a place of real anger because what has happened to her sister?
Her sister died. She got killed by one of those boy pilots.
Right.
And then Zetian was like, you know what? Screw the patriarchy. I'm going to take it down.
And so she's really angry, and for other reasons as well, which we can get into. But she decides to become a pilot as well. And what is her plan when she decides this?
Oh, she is gonna slit that boy pilot's throat in his sleep.
So the book, I have to forewarn you, there's some violence in the book.
She kills a lot of people.
And she is she's very angry, and she's out to avenge
Yes.
her sister's death. But there's other things going on for her as well that have kind of stacked up. So physically, she's been extremely injured. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Was not the word I would use because
Okay. What's the right word?
she's just like her feet are bound because like in not even ancient China, but like it happened as recently as 100 years ago, and there's still women alive who have had their feet bound, which is when they like crush your foot so that your like four toes like wrap around your foot. And then like your feet gets crushed to like less than the size of your palm. So there are still women alive who had that happen to them. And it was a custom in China for like 1,000 years because of reasons, many political reasons that like I won't get into because they're too long. But anyway, she had that happen to her, so she can only like hobble around.
Yeah, which is just phenomenal. So she lives with this horrible pain in her feet, and really, when she is not inside a chrysalis piloting, she's in pain and she can barely get around. And I think at one point she's in a wheelchair, isn't she?
Yeah.
So she's disabled. But what was really interesting is that when she does go into that sort of mind space and is using her spirit pressure, is that right?
Yes.
And the link with the other male pilot, the pain is gone, is that right?
Yeah.
And that's the first time, it's really an amazing moment when she realizes that she's without physical pain.
Yeah, so like that's her being free from her mortal coil.
Yeah, I love that moment because for me it sets up why she's so angry and out for revenge,
Yeah.
which I just want to say is completely unique to a female character that I've read. I have not read a female character who is so hell-bent on,
Killing people?
not everybody though. She's out to make,
She doesn't kill some people. She doesn't kill everyone.
she's out to get her oppressors.
Yes.
And that seemed fair to me.
Which is, yeah, that's interesting because definitely, like, I've seen a lot of reviewers be like, oh my god, I love the book. Hated Zetian, but I love the book. Just because, like, she makes a lot of morally questionable choices. But, like, I've also seen reviewers say that even though they don't agree with those choices, they can see where she's coming from, which, like, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's new and fresh, right? So I think we're used to seeing hero, like especially male hero villains who've, been wronged in some way, going out for revenge. I think we've all seen those hero movies where you have the villain and something terrible happened to them in their childhood. They lost someone in their lives horribly, and so they're out for revenge. That, to me, seems like a very common trope. But to see a female hero character who is the protagonist have that as their backstory, to me was unique.
Oh, really? Well, thank you.
Yeah, is that something that you thought about in the writing process?
It's actually super weird because, like, originally this wasn't going to be a retelling of China's only female emperor, Wu Zetian. But then, so actually the first chapter had her just, like, being drafted to be a concubine instead, so it's very passive. But the moment I decided to make it a retelling, immediately she, like, had her own agenda, so she has to go by her own volition. So, like, she had to go volunteer out of revenge, and she has to drive the plot herself. And, like, essentially this entire plot, like, warped around her, just because I was writing basically, like, historical real person fan fiction. And, like, the only in-character thing for her to do is to, like, be that, like, guiding force in her own life. And to, like, actively go and seek out revenge instead of, like, waiting for the forces to, like, pluck her up.
I think it's a great choice. It's way more active for that main character.
Yeah, so, like, she guided the plot because just out of her characterization.
Something that I love about the book is that it has this really historical feel and yet also futuristic as well. And you've described it as a retelling of the rise of Empress Wu.
Yeah.
Or do you say emperor or empress?
Technically, it's Empress Regent Wu, but, like, Empress Wu is fine.
Can you tell us about how that real life story inspired your story?
Yeah, so in China, like Empress Wu is basically every girl's icon, just because she's the only woman to have ever like become proper ruler of China in its own right, and she did it during China's most powerful dynasty, the Tang Dynasty. And so like she rose up from being like a concubine in charge of changing bed sheets to just becoming like the most powerful person in the empire and probably the entire world at the time. So it's like it's such an epic journey, and I have a 2-part series about it on my YouTube channel if you guys are interested.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, and I'm so glad that you brought these elements of Chinese myth to this book, because I learned a lot, and I have to confess I didn't always understand the connections, but I was totally happy to go along with it. Oh, okay, this is I guess there's parts where you touch on this is the water element, or this is the fire element, and it's part of their characters. So this works with that, or it's in conflict. And I was like, I don't really understand it, but I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I was just like, you know what, if you don't understand it, it is fine. So I wrote the elemental system like that just because my editors kept asking me, oh, like, can you explain the element system better? And I was like, if you're not Chinese, I just can't really, I can't really explain it to you if you don't know. If you know, you know. If you don't know, I can't really explain, because it's such a culturally ingrained thing. But still, like, it doesn't, I think I even see in the book, like, oh, you don't need to understand this. Because she's like, I think, yeah, at one point she's like, I don't really understand what's going on, but it's fine, I'm going along with it. It takes, like, years of study to, like, understand the discipline of this. So that's kind of my nod to, like, if you don't understand the system, that's fine.
So I'm really curious about your writing process too, especially if we have writers here in our audience today. Were those cultural elements something that you just understand because it's part of your background, or did you do research, or how much research was there? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, they were pretty much just part of my cultural background, I guess. But I did do like deeper dives on like the mythology and stuff, because the giant mecha in my book are based off of like Chinese myth creatures. So like the moon rabbit or the nine-tailed fox.
I love the nine-tailed fox. That's the first mecha that we see, and that's the one that Xiran goes into with another pilot?
Yeah,
is that right? Can you tell us about that moment and what the nine-tailed fox represents?
Well, actually, yes. That's a really good question, because like in like Chinese culture, like women who are very devious are known as like fox spirits, and they're known to fox spirits in the legends. They like seduce men and then devour their flesh, devour their hearts and stuff. So like women who are very like cunning are just like they're known as like fox spirits, so it's an insult to women. But then she takes control of this like giant mecha that's based off of a nine-tailed fox. So it's very symbolic.
I loved all those elements, and I think they add such great depth to the book. And I feel like, if someone wants to learn more, they can go out and watch your channel and
for the real history, not like, because there were no giant robots in the Tang Dynasty, unfortunately.
And Empress Wu, so she didn't come from royalty. She was
not.
Was she
That would be
considered
incest.
a commoner?
Yes, she was like new money. So her dad was not aristocracy. Her dad just got rich like selling lumber in the previous dynasty. So yeah, she was considered like new money, and then all old money were like, oh god, no.
Oh, and there's that element of the class system in there as well.
Yeah, like in her reign, she really ate the rich. She was very about like meritocracy, and so like she really revamped the imperial examination system and gave a lot more chances for commoners to become officials through studying and taking exams. I know you guys hate that idea, but you know what? That's better than a meritocracy. No, that's better than a what is it called?
Autocracy?
Not autocracy. It's like when the rich get all the opportunities. It's something.
Yes.
It's oligarchy?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you think Empress Wu was ruthless?
She definitely was. But then again, I think people overstate her ruthlessness, because really, like, she wasn't like more ruthless than most other emperors. Because like the emperor before, like her first emperor husband, like he's just straight up like killed two two of his brothers in an ambush, and then like forced his dad to retire, and then also he like killed like several dozen of his nephews or something. So like, but people still know him as a really great emperor, even though he was definitely ruthless in taking the throne. But then people are just, they overstate her ruthlessness because they're like, oh my god, a woman killing all these people, no, what?
Yeah, and I think that circles back to, you know, what we were talking about earlier as a female having that kind of path to revenge. It's not really that unusual in a male character, but for a female, it seems doubly extreme, I guess.
Yeah, for some reason that like people think that women are more gentle and more kind, but like that's a dangerous assumption to have. Women have the right to be feral, okay?
Yeah, and I think it's seen as a negative aspect of a female character. And then someone was explaining to me the other day, I thought that was really interesting. They said anger can be, anger is a way or a means to show that someone has stepped over your boundaries. And
I really like that.
I like that too, because I thought, you know what? I don't get angry that often, but when I do, I could relate to that. I'm like, yeah, someone is pushing me into a place I don't want to be. And I feel like when we look at Zetian through that lens, it makes perfect sense. Her boundaries have been so pushed and crushed and broken. I mean, in an extreme way. She's had her feet crushed. Her sister has been used up and killed. I mean, no wonder she's angry. I get it.
Yeah, she's just like charging on a torrent of anger always.
Yeah, and it keeps her going. So now there's a really neat character who balances out that anger that she meets early in the book. And I wonder if you could talk about their relationship with and I'm going to pronounce his name incorrectly, Gao Yiji.
Oh, Gao Yizhi, yeah.
Gao Yiji.
So Yizhi is like the quintessential rich boy, and he's pretty privileged. So he likes Zetian, but he may not understand what she's going through. But still, he like tries to see her side and see like why she's so angry. And he thinks that like all her problems would be solved if he just like took her, married her, and like brought her into the city. But she's like, no, like I can see that if I did marry you, I would have to like still go through so much BS, and I would rather die. I would rather die than go through that. And so he's like, oh.
So she takes a different path, and she's like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to, put it all out there.
Yeah.
And risk my life and die trying. And yet he manages to reconnect with her.
Yeah, because he has all the connections. So he's like, you know what, like no one's going to do anything to me anyway. I'm rich, so I'm just going to go help her whatever way I can.
And even though he has a very gentle spirit, he proves to have this inner iron strength.
Yeah, he does. He's gonna do some stuff in the sequel. There is a sequel to this, so I can't say much about it, but he's definitely gonna be playing like 3D chess in the sequel.
Oh, great. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So now one of the other three main characters is Li Shimin, if I pronounced that right, also known as the Iron Demon. And he's the strongest and most controversial pilot. And so in the story, after Zetian has already sort of proved herself, she has to go up against him as well. And he's done some terrible things in his past. But we find out is in some ways very similar to Zetian.
Yeah.
Has also been absolutely crushed by this same system.
Yeah, it's because like masculinity is not always like a respected thing. Like, of course, in our society, like white men can be as masculine as they want. But like, if you're an ethnic non-white like minority, then like masculinity is actually frowned upon in you. If you're like too masculine, you get seen as a threat. So Shimin is based off that emperor I was talking about who like killed his brothers and all his nephews. And then the historical him was like part ethnic minority of China. So he was not like, the ethnic majority in China is Han, the Han Chinese. And then he was half Xianbei, He was part Xianbei. So in this book, he is also like part ethnic minority, like Xianbei. And then his masculinity is seen as a threat to the dominant majority instead. So like, there's a point in the story where you just like, oh, Zetian, if you were a boy, you would probably like take over the world by now. And then she's like, no, actually, it depends on which kind of boy I am, because like masculinity is not always celebrated. Like if you're not part of the dominant majority, your masculinity gets seen as a threat.
That's really an interesting cultural difference.
Yeah. So you got to get that intersectional feminism.
Yes. I really like that he's not what he seems to be. And I don't want to give it away, but...
He's a buff nerd is what he is.
But he comes
Still
out...
a murderer, though. Cool motive, still a murderer.
And something that I loved about the book also, so we've introduced the 3 characters now, and they have a really interesting relationship, polyamory, which is, I mean,
they all date each other.
They all date each other. So
yes.
It's...
so yes, she has 2 boyfriends, and her boyfriends are also boyfriends, so they complete the triangle.
I love that, because when we normally hear about triangles, it's usually actually really a straight line, and that, you know, you have 2 gender, or, you know, one gender of 2 different people sort of both love the same girl, or the girl loves both guys. But
yeah, that is a love corner, okay? That is the alligator mouth that tells you which number is bigger than the other. You gotta have that last line to make it a true triangle.
Yeah, and we never see that.
Which is actually like pretty surprising, because like that trope is pretty common in fanfic circles. So I didn't think that it would be that big of a deal when I wrote it into the story and tried to get it published. But apparently, yeah, it's actually super rare in YA, and then Iron Widow is considered like a pioneer in this.
I think so, and it brings a great balance, this sort of love story between the 3 of them, because they're very comfortable with it. Like there's a moment where they sort of go, oh, should we, you know, be upset that we're sharing? And then...
Well, if everyone's happy, I mean, why complain?
And I think that's great, because there is so much anger and violence, that having the relationship be the very smooth, we agree to get along.
Yeah. Like, so Dan's just like, you know what, everything else in my life is very terrible and violent, but at least I have 2 boyfriends, and my boyfriends are also boyfriends.
I thought it was lovely. The world building was really exciting for me, because I find that fascinating. How did you develop, like what did you start with? What was the kernel of your story that you started with?
So it was definitely the pilot system, where I decided to do a more dystopian pilot system and more dark one than the one that inspired me in Darling in the Franxx. So yeah, Darling in the Franxx, it had like girls being paired with boys, and then the girls are like on all fours while the guy is behind them. That's why I said don't Google this anime in polite company. So that's not how the seating arrangement works in my book. It's like the guy hugs the girl from behind instead. But in Darling in the Franxx, they didn't really get into like the inherent like gender inequality in that setup. Because, like, definitely the girl is there being sexualized, and her butt is, like, right in the guy's face, but... but they don't really, like, get into, like, the misogyny of that. And so in my book, I decided to deliberately make it, like, really oppressive to the girls.
Yeah, so that's a very unique aspect of your story. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left, so I do want to throw it out there. I know many of you have not had a chance to read the book, but do you have any questions about the story, or the writing process, or the writing life? Just think on that for a second. You can throw your hand up if you do.
Yes, you can also ask me about YouTubing. That's actually like my main gig. Hello, what is up? Oh, okay, so most of my characters are named after historical figures. It's kind of like a Chinese history all-stars going on here. So how many of you are Chinese? 1 or 2 people? Okay. Oh, look at you. I know you're the class clown. They're always trying to be funny. So yeah. So it's like lots of familiar Chinese names like Sima Yi, Zhuge Liang. So if you're Chinese, you'll find like the Easter eggs all over there.
Great question. Yes, at the back.
Yeah, a lot of it comes from my upbringing actually, because I grew up in China until I was like 12. So this book is definitely very Chinese, and I just like poured all of that into there. And this is actually the first book that's based on my Chinese heritage that I wrote. Because like before, I used to be like, oh, it'll be too self-indulgent if I wrote a Chinese book. But no, this one I was just like, I'm gonna make it so Chinese. If you don't get it, I don't care.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love being thrown in at the deep end. It's not for everybody to have that level of fantasy, but you know what's interesting is the very first chapter is very heavy science fiction and explaining the story. And when I first read it, I thought, I'm not sure, this is a lot for me. It's coming at me like a fire hose. But then the second chapter, we're fully in Zetian's voice, and I was hooked from right to the end. I'm like, her voice is mesmerizing.
Oh, thank you.
I'm like, I need to channel part of this person to be more effective in my life.
Oh, that is so good to hear.
Yes, and you know what? I'm going to repeat the question so
Okay,
that the camera can hear it. Yes. How long did it take you to write the book? Great question.
Yeah, so I wrote most of it in like a 2-month blitz. And then I had to take 3 months off because I was still in university at the time, pretty busy semester. And then I finished it off, finished and polished it in 3 more months. So 5 months on and off, which is actually pretty quick for writing a book. And it's just because like this story really like just gripped me the moment I thought of it. And I was like, I have to write this. I know this is gonna take me places. And it did.
That's incredible because most authors do take about 3 years to write a book, I can tell you. So 5 months is about 6 times faster. So what was your day like as you were writing? Were you, when did you get up and how did your actual day-to-day look for the writing process?
Oh, don't ask me questions which answers you don't want to know. It's a giant mess because I write best in like the AMs. So I would like go to sleep at 5 a.m. and then wake up at like 3 p.m. or something. It's just a mess. I am a mess. That's still my schedule actually. So actually right now I'm like, running off like 3 hours of sleep.
So you write overnight then?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I don't know if it's because like my sleep schedule belongs in China or something. I don't know. Something evolutionary. Hello there in the back. Do I ever just read my own book? Absolutely not. So I can't even crack that open. If I try to open it, I'm like, oh no. I've read it so, no. So that happens to most authors I know. They're just like, I love that you like my book and that you love to read my book. Me, never again. I'm never looking at my own story again.
So we've talked a little bit about your writing process, but I wonder if you could talk about the publishing process, finding an agent, and what that was like, because it was typical, but I think the level of perseverance for success is something that is remarkable.
So my publishing process was like 7 years of pain. I started when I was 15, and I was trying to get published. I thought I was like so good, wrote like such a masterpiece of a novel, and then it got rejected to hell and back. And then it took me, this is my 4th book that I ever wrote, and this is the only one that took me there. Like before, it was just like hundreds of rejections after rejection. Like technically there are only 2 phases to getting a book deal. You find a literary agent, and then your literary agent submits your manuscript to the various big publishers out there, and they like offer on it if they want it. So seems super simple, right? Just 2 steps. But then that first step, finding an agent, took me like 5 years on and off. And then finding a publisher was like 2 more years. And then I got my agent with my 3rd book, but then that didn't sell. So this was my 4th book. So yes, in total, it took 7 years. So if you have dreams of becoming an author, start now while you're in school.
That's incredible. How many query letters or, how many agents or publishers do you think you reached out to?
Oh my God, hundreds.
Really?
Just hundreds, yeah, for each book. So I queried like some of them just multiple times, like probably 3 times. And what's interesting is that all these agents ignored me before, but now that I'm a #1 New York Times bestseller, they're all up in my inbox again, just like all up in my DMs, being like, hey, hello, bestseller. And I'm like, weren't you the guy who ignored me like 2 years back? And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
How does that feel?
It does feel really good to be like, oh, look at you crawling to me now.
Here's a question. Yep.
Do I know what I'm writing for my next project? Feel pressure? Oh yes, I definitely feel a lot of pressure because I have to do a sequel for this book, and I'm already like several months late on my deadline for that sequel because of reasons. Yeah, but I also I have another book deal. So I have a middle grade series that's coming out next summer, and it's like Chinese Percy Jackson meets Yu-Gi-Oh. How many of you know Yu-Gi-Oh? Oh, thank God, it's not as old as I thought it was. But anyways, so that's coming out next summer. It's about this like Chinese American boy who's not really connected to his heritage, but then the spirit of the first emperor of China like possesses his AR gaming headset and then compels him to go on a journey across China to like heist artifacts and defeat figures from Chinese history and mythology. So I'm super excited for that one.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, this is my first published book.
Since we have a little bit more time, can you tell us about your YouTubing?
My YouTubing happened by complete accident. So like last September, the Mulan movie came out, right? Mulan 2020. And then I had so many problems with that movie that I recorded a video of myself ranting about it for like 40 minutes straight, and then I just like posted it on YouTube. I made a channel just to like throw that video on there, and I was like, whatever. And then like 5 days later, someone tells me, oh my God, your Mulan video has like 100,000 views. And I was like, what? And now it has like almost 3 million views. And then I got 80,000 subscribers from that one video, and they bullied me into making more videos. So that's what I do now. I just like make videos on YouTube, and then I keep getting bullied into making more. It wasn't even my main gig, and now it is. Just because people are like, more rants, please. We'd love to see you rant about stuff. And so yes, that's how my YouTube career started. I don't know how many of you want to become YouTubers, but I don't know. It just happens like that sometimes. So maybe just record yourself like ranting and post it on YouTube and see what happens.
Do you think that's connected to your writing in some way? Like you found an audience that...
Oh yeah, for sure. Because people are very interested when I talk about like Chinese history and culture stuff. So like I always like plug my book at the end. Like, oh, if you like this video, you know what else you might like? My book.
I think people really want authentic voices. So... And you've done that.
Maybe. I don't know. It's hello. Yes, class clown there. Xiran Zhao is just my author name.
Yep. So if you Google Xiran's name, then you will find
my YouTube channel.
All of the goodies that are out there.
Oh, I just know he's going to come and flame me.
Oh, we've got, let's say one last question at the back.
Oh, cosplay, you can go on my Instagram to see, which is also just under my name. So I've done like Wonder Woman, Catwoman, Dark Magician Girl, a bunch of things. Blue Angel from Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns. So like all of those kind of things.
Actually, that leads me to one last note.
Oh, right. So 7 years ago when I was trying to get published, I made a bet with my friends. Well, my friends were like, yeah, it was a bet. And I was like, yes, if I actually do become a published author, I will take my author photo in a cow onesie. And I made that bet when I was in my teens, when I was just like this dumb teenager. And then it turns out I actually did become a published author. So yes, so my author photo is just me wearing a cow suit.
It stands out. I've never seen an author photo in a cow onesie, so.
Yeah, and that photo is actually taken with my phone's front camera, so I don't really know how it passed like my publisher's like print requirements because, that's actually not a very good quality photo. But apparently everyone thinks it is because I used a lot of like fancy lighting. And so it got passed, and I never had to retake the photo. And now it's just me dressed as a cow in my. On
It's
my book.
fun. No one's going to forget it.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, thank you to everybody here today and to our online audience that are going to watch this. It's fantastic talking to you. I hope you enjoy the book. It's really exciting. I wouldn't be surprised if it was turned into a film or a series. I don't know. Do you have whispers
if
on
someone
that?
wants to throw all that money there, it's fine, I guess. But yeah,
It's so visual. I would love to see it.
who knows? Who knows? Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our great audience for being good listeners today.